Who is Andrea Pacini? Had you always wanted to be an entrepreneur? What's your most useful or used app that you use every day? Welcome to the JOD Pod, a micro podcast where we interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, founders, authors, and coaches. Today, we are very lucky to be joined by Andrea Pacini, presentation coach and founder at Ideas on Stage UK. Andrea, great to have you on the JOD Pod.
Thank you. Great to be here, James. You pronounce my name perfectly. Thank you very much.
That means a lot. Thank you very much. Andrea, for those of us who don't know who you are, who is Andrea Pacini?
So, James, I'm a presentation coach and I'm the founder of a company called Ideas on Stage in the UK. I'm in London, but we are also in Paris, Milan, Barcelona, and LA in the US. Just to give you an idea, in the last 11 years, we've been working with thousands of clients, from small business owners and professionals to clients like Microsoft, Lacoste, the World Bank. We've been coaching more than 500 TEDx speakers so far. Although we talk about TED Talks, but we specialize in working with business owners who want to either grow their business or increase their influence through great presenting. So James, for us, it's all about presentation skills and public speaking.
Wonderful. And is this your own business? How does that work? You're everywhere, but you're specifically in the UK.
True. So what happened was that Ideas on Stage UK is my business, but I was doing these on my own until a few years ago. And then Ideas on Stage existed before me in the UK. And I contacted Ideas on Stage in Paris. That's where the headquarters is, because I always looked at them as the top brand from a presentation skills perspective, at least in Europe. And so I just wanted to learn from them. And I said, by any chance, are you running any courses, workshops in London? And to my surprise, they said, you know what, we know you are. Like, I didn't expect that. And they said, we are not doing anything in the UK, but why don't we have a chat? And so just to make it short, at the time, they were just thinking about expanding their activities in the UK. And so we had a chat and we decided to get together. So it's my business, but what I've done, I've taken the brand and I've launched it in the UK.
Fantastic. Okay, that makes sense. And you're now an entrepreneur. You're running your own business. How long have you been running Ideas on Stage UK for?
Since 2018, 19, yeah, a few years, yeah.
Few years, excellent.
And before that, I was running another presentation design agency, which the name was Absolute Presentation. So same thing, but I was just doing it on my own at the time.
Makes sense. And had you always wanted to be an entrepreneur?
I've always been super passionate about entrepreneurship and business in general. And then that's not how I started my professional career. I was working for somebody else, for another company, at the beginning of my career. But I always had that fire, that thing that you always think about when you go to sleep and when you wake up in the morning. So yeah, always very interested in these areas.
Awesome. And what was the catalyst that made you move from being an employee over to running your own business?
So I don't know if there was like one thing in particular, but before starting my own business, I started many other projects, little projects, blogs, videos, newsletters, lots of things, and most of them failed miserably. But if I go back, even when I was working for somebody else, I've always been doing something else on the side as a side hustle. And that taught me a lot, even if all of these experiments failed, but in a way, it was part of at least my own entrepreneurial journey.
I think that's such a valuable lesson to teach anybody that's listening, we're trying to inspire people to step out their comfort zones and start something for themselves. It doesn't always have to be successful. And the word experiment, I think, is so powerful there, because everything's an experiment. Nobody knows what's going to work or be successful. And experimenting and trying different things out until you figure out where you kind of sit, I think is great. Can you remember how you got your first customer as an entrepreneur?
Here's the thing. I don't remember the very first customer, but I do remember the very first customer after I set up Ideas on Stage in the UK. And at the time, I joined a business accelerator, and that's where we also met each other. And it was the very first day, James, and just a couple of hours after the very first day at the business accelerator, it was in a workshop in London. Because I introduced myself, I was one of the new people there. I introduced myself and I mentioned something about presentation skills. And one of the other attendees, it was coffee break, came to me. At the time, he had an important presentation coming up. And so we got to know each other. And just 2 hours after on the very first day of that business accelerator, I got my first client.
That's awesome. Those coffee breaks, they're worth their weight in gold at those accelerators. You never know who's going to be there, and you never know when you're going to run into your ideal client.
Yeah, and it was also because, and that perhaps for your audience, another. I don't want to give any lessons, but just another thought. I remember the guy who was running the accelerator asked, do we have any new people here? And if so, do you want to introduce yourself? Now, not everybody did, but I just said, you know what, I just want to make the most of this experience. I introduced myself. And just because I introduced myself, that guy understood that I could have helped him with that presentation. If I didn't introduce myself, then the first client wouldn't have happened.
Yeah, you need to get yourself in front of people. It doesn't matter if it's in person, online, talking about what you sell, and it's not evil to do that. You just need to share what you do. So presentations took. Why presentations? Why is this your passion? How did you get started in doing this kind of work?
Yeah, because especially if you think about business presentations, most of them suck. Isn't that true? They are boring, they're too long, too detailed, full of facts and figures, and it doesn't work from a communication perspective. And the way I started, I got really interested in this because, going back to your first question, because I've always been interested in business and entrepreneurship. I always read, and I love reading entrepreneurship books. And as I started doing that, one of the things I found like a common element through many business books was this idea of, as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, the idea of being able to pitch and present and communicate your ideas effectively. And so I started to see this common element, that connection between being good in a business and being good as a presenter, as a communicator. And then there was one book in particular, Presentation Zen, by Gar Reynolds, who is the father of effective presentations, mainly from a design perspective, although we focus on other areas as well. And that book, James, was like love at first sight. Presentation Zen by Gar Reynolds. I discovered sometimes if you think about presentation skills, a lot of people immediately think about PowerPoint. But it's so much more than just PowerPoint, so much more than just the presentation tool. And that book opened my eyes to what we were really talking about when you think about presentation skills. So it started with that book.
Wonderful. And that was something that you started using in your existing job, I'm guessing, learning how to do the presentations and you became so good at it that you could teach others and help others on their journey.
Absolutely, because before working for myself, before Ideas on Stage, I used to work in sales, business development for a multinational company here in London. And in that particular role, especially if you're in sales, marketing, business development, you need to present all the time. It could be a presentation to a potential client, to an existing client. It could be, let's call it leadership communication to your teams, a project update. You are always presenting. And so absolutely, that was something that I've also developed even before I started doing that for my own clients.
Awesome. And if people are listening to this thinking, well, presentation skills is something that I want to improve on, that I want to get better on, what's the best way for them to interact with you and figure out, how to improve their skills? Where do they start?
Sure. A couple of things. So if they want to interact with me, then they can find me on the usual social media, the usual suspects, particularly LinkedIn. I use LinkedIn a lot. Andrea Pacini on LinkedIn. The other thing is, you ask, where do you start? Now, if you want to start, you need to understand your current situation from a presentation skills perspective. Where are you today with your presentation skills? Now, for example, at Ideas on Stage, we have a tool. It's a scorecard that people can take to very quickly assess their own presentation skills. They just need to answer 27 questions, yes and no, very simple, and they'll get a score and what their score means to them. And it takes less than 5 minutes. It's free, and the URL, the link is ideasonstage.com/score.
And they would go there. Someone listening to this now could go there, fill out that form, and they'd get a score of how good they are at presenting. And then what do they do with that score after then? What's the
and not just one score, but you get an overall score, but also that benchmarks your ability to give powerful business presentations on 5 key steps, the key steps of the presentation process. So your ability, for example, to develop a compelling message, your ability to amplify your message with powerful visuals, your ability to deliver your message in a way that's comfortable and convincing. After that, once you've got that, then another thing they can do, for example, I run a weekly web class, which is a free resource on all things presentation skills. Sometimes we talked about the message, sometimes about slide design, sometimes about delivery skills. And again, they can find me on Eventbrite, for example, if they type my name. And it's a weekly web class for free. It's less than an hour. And it's full of tips and techniques from a public speaking perspective as well.
Wonderful. Well, we'll share links to all of that down below. For the people that are thinking about this, what's the kind of internal monologue or the issues that they're currently suffering with, either in their job or in their business, that you think it would make it worth their while investing in presentation skills?
I see, James, 3 key obstacles when it comes to effective presenting. The first one, and it's the most important one, when people prepare a presentation, the outcome from a message perspective often is a confusing message. Often because we know so much about our subject, and also we are so close to it, we think that what we are communicating and the way we are communicating it, we think that it's simple for the audience to understand. We think that it's clear, that it's engaging. But often the experience from the audience's perspective is the opposite. It's confusing. And in business communication, it's very simple. If you confuse, you lose the audience's attention. So that's one thing. The other obstacle I see is the typical death by PowerPoint from a visual perspective. So you see those slides on PowerPoint or any other presentation tool. It doesn't make any difference. Full of text and bullet points, but people can't read and listen at the same time. So that's another obstacle and another area to invest in, definitely. And then the third obstacle I see is this inability to connect, to make a strong connection with the audience. So that's about your delivery skills, which, by the way, James, it's even harder now online. most communication at the moment is happening online. Now, it's still possible to make a good connection online, but if you don't know what to do, it is harder. It is harder to keep the attention high, for example, online versus on stage.
That's awesome. And I think for anybody out there that's in a role or running a business that they're doing any kind of presenting to people, or they're doing online, which I think most businesses should be doing something online where they're presenting to people now. Check out what Andrea's doing. Check out Ideas on Stage UK. That link for the scorecard, again, so you can get a score for your presentation skills, is ideasonstage.com/score. It makes perfect sense for anybody that's looking to improve those skills, which, as you say, Andrea, are so much more important now in the digital age. Thanks for sharing that. Are you ready for some quick fire questions now?
Let's go.
Good on you. So, what's your most useful or used app that you use every day?
Okay, right. So can I give you maybe 2 or 3 ideas? Does it have to be one? Quickly. So because I don't have one. So one is Zapier, for example. I don't know if you know Zapier. Anytime you want to connect one tool or one app with another, that, for example, somebody registers for your webinar on Eventbrite, and then something else happens. Maybe they receive an automatic email saying thank you for registration, things like that. I couldn't live without Zapier. Zoom is another tool I use every day for webinars, for conversations with clients, with potential clients, coaching sessions. I do everything on Zoom. And Loom is another tool. Like, for example, with my team, if I want to share maybe tutorials or guideline documents on specific tasks, instead of wasting a lot of time with written communication, you just record a quick video on Loom and then you share it. Super useful. So Loom, Zoom, and Zapier.
I thought you were going to go for all Zs. I was thinking, what's going to be the other app that begins with a Z? But you went with a rhyme on the Loom and Zoom. That's fantastic. Yeah, I use all of those. I think Loom is a fantastic little tool, actually, for use in sales or tutorials. Really, really interesting. Thanks for sharing those, Andrea. What's your most gifted book? What book do you share with your best friends, your new clients? Yeah. Your network?
Yeah, so up until a few days ago, it was Presentation Zen by Gar Reynolds. Now I never do this, James, but if you don't mind, just because the timing is perfect, my colleague, he runs Ideas on Stage in Paris. He just published a book, Business Presentation Revolution, which you see here, the orange one. Phil Wakenell, you can find me on Amazon. Now, of course, I'm biased, but I do believe I read everything there is to read from a presentation skills perspective. And I do believe that this is an amazing book, Business Presentation Revolution, Phil Wakenell, but also the other one, fantastic book, Presentation Zen by Gar Reynolds.
There's 2 fantastic recommendations there, and I think it's always interesting. A friend of mine has just released a book, and that he's written, and it's so interesting when you read someone that you know's book, because actually sometimes the things that they've said to you hundreds of times, once they've written it down in a book, all of a sudden I've gone, it's just used a slightly different analogy. There's a slightly different cadence, the way you read to the way that you might listen to someone. It's a really interesting process to go through. So, Phil, you've got your shout out. I hope you're happy. I really do hope you're happy.
He will be.
Andrea, what do you love listening to on the podcast or love watching on your YouTube channels?
It's actually just one thing, really, because I'm not very much into podcasts. I love reading. So wherever I can, I read. But podcasts, it's just one, Tim Ferriss. I think most people know it. I'm not the only one. The Tim Ferriss show, So when I'm traveling, if I'm not reading, or for example, I like running. I run every day, and just not to waste time, I like to be efficient and productive. Then I always have Tim Ferriss on when I'm running. And the reason why I like it so much, apart from the fact that he often interviews people in the business entrepreneurship world, but he goes deep. Like he does maybe 2-hour interviews, sometimes even longer. And if you take the time, you really get wonderful insights from him and his guests.
Wonderful. We're the antithesis to Tim Ferriss. We're short, sharp interviews, Andrea. So if you're having a high intensity run or a shorter run, the JOD Pod can help you out.
The job, actually, I should have said, of course, that's beyond, like, apart from the JOD Pod, then so JOD Pod, and then when I have time, Tim Ferriss.
Tim Ferriss, lucky, yeah. If Tim Ferriss is lucky, he gets in here. Thanks for that. Who should we be keeping an eye on in your industry? Who's an up and comer?
Great question. I think anybody or any organization who is working on hybrid events. So, like in my world, public speaking, presentation skills, before COVID, 99% of that was face-to-face events. With COVID, everything moved to online. I think now, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I don't have a crystal ball, James, but I do think this is what I'm seeing. The hybrid events where you've got a mix of, you've got an online element and then a face-to-face element, this might be the future. So, for example, there is one company I like to follow. It's Hopin. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly, Hopin, Hopin. And they are very much into online events, but of course now they're also shifting a little bit towards hybrid events. And that's definitely a space to follow.
That's really interesting. Hopin, I have heard of them as a business. My wife is an evil lawyer, and she does lots of events and helps businesses do events as well from an insurance perspective. And she has to look at the small print in all of these businesses, and that's a really interesting kind of paradigm that's being created there, because you need those coffees. You need those breakouts where you have a coffee, so you meet your customers.
Exactly.
You never know where you're going to meet people. That's wonderful. And Andrea, can you repeat again, where's the best place for people to get in contact with you if they've loved what you're talking about?
Yeah, social media, on LinkedIn mainly, Andrea Pacini, you can find me there. And for the scorecard, the Impactful Presenter Scorecard, the online tool to assess your own presentation skills, ideasonstage.com/score.
Wonderful. Really easy. There we have it. Andrea Pacini is a presentation coach and founder of Ideas on Stage UK. They specialize in working with established service-based business owners who want to grow their business and increase their influence through great presenting. Andrea got his first customer by having a coffee at a business accelerator where I know Andrea from. 2 hours later, that coffee that he shared with a fellow attendee was a customer of his. That's all because he got out of his seat and presented and shared what he was about. What a great example of why presentation skills are so important in today's business world. Andrea was very greedy. He's recommended 3 apps for us to use, but they all kind of rhyme with each other. There's Zapier, which he uses to connect tools together and automations. There's Zoom, where he runs all of his webinars and he delivers his coaching sessions through. And Loom, which he uses to share small tutorial videos with his team. He's recommended 2 books, Presentation Zen by Guy Reynolds and Andrea's friend, Phil Wakemill, Business Presentation Revolution. You can see it there if you're watching this on YouTube over his left shoulder. Great cover. I think we're all going to be getting involved in that business revolution and learning presentation skills after listening to Andrea. After the JOD Pod, Andrea loves listening to Tim Ferriss on his runs. I don't think Tim needs any more help building that podcast up. And we should be keeping an eye on a business, Hop In, delivering hybrid events in this post-COVID world, online to offline and back again. Really interesting space. It's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next couple of years, internationally and locally for those events. And if you want to test yourself and figure out where your presentation skills are and see how Andrea might be able to help you out, check out his website. It's ideasonstage.com/score, or drop Andrea a message on LinkedIn. Say you heard about him on the JOD Pod, and I'm pretty sure he will accept all of your invites and answer any questions that you might have about presenting. And also we'll put a link in the show notes to his weekly event where he shares some knowledge about presenting. I can say that correctly. I'm very good at this. Presenting and his breakdown of PowerPoints and slides and how you overcome those 3 obstacles to fantastic presenting skills. Andrea, thank you ever so much for joining us today on the JOD Pod.
Thank you very much, James. I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you.
Awesome. And thank you for joining us today on the JOD Pod. If you've enjoyed this interview with Andrea and you want to hear more inspiring entrepreneurs, how they got started and where they are now, you need to play the YouTube game. You need to hit subscribe, hit the bell, hit the like button. And why not ask Andrea a question in the comments below? I'm sure you've got some questions about starting your own business, maybe about going into partnership with other businesses, and also those presentation skills. Ask Andrea a question down below, and I will bully Andrea to come back and answer every single one of those questions. It'll help out the video, it'll help out Andrea, and it will just bring that kind of nice altruistic feedback loop into your heart and give yourself a better day. So please be inspired by Andrea. Go and build something yourself and inspire the next generation. Thanks for joining us today on the JOD Pod. If you enjoyed this interview, why don't you check out some of these other interviews that we've done on the JOD Pod. More inspirational CEOs, coaches, entrepreneurs, founders, and authors. I'm sure there's something here that will inspire you to build something new.